A nyní poprosím o vystoupení a prezentaci našeho hosta z Belgie, pana Rolanda Waeyaerta, který vás seznámí s praktickými zkušenostmi z Belgie týkajícími se právě expertního dobrovolnictví.
Good morning again to everyone. I am very glad I can present to you Exchange, and this is a volunteers organization promoting private entrepreneurship in developing economies. I can easily speak about 2 hours on Exchange, but I know that my time is limited to 30 minutes. I will speak mainly on 3 things. What is Exchange doing and why? And I will give you examples on that. 2, what are the procedures? What is the approach? What is the working method of Exchange? And then I will focus a little bit on volunteers. And 3, I really go in the details on volunteer work. So this is my program for the next 30 minutes together with you. First part, examples, what are we doing? In South Africa, there is a company producing jewels. And they have a huge potential, and they want to market their products all over the world. But they do not have themselves the financial means to pay for the expertise. And they contact Exchange. And they ask for the know-how of a person who was a full professional career, a marketeer for jewelry. It is the lady in the middle of the photo. You see that these people were very satisfied with her help. Another volunteer working at Exchange is Dirk Vervakke. He's an engineer with really a nice top career. And he was asked to go to Latin America, and it was a coffee plantation who asked for his support, for his know-how. And even he has already the satisfaction of a nice professional career. You can read that he was very satisfied by this project in Latin America. The people there, they asked for a feasibility study for automatization of sorting of coffee beans and the improvement of the production process. And this is really the know-how which has Mr. Vervakke. And you have also the result in front of you. It was tremendous after his intervention how they could increase their production. Other example. Totally other example, you can say. In Uganda, there is a free radio station, so a private radio station. And it wants to develop, it wants to grow, it wants to increase its activities, but once again, lacks the money to pay for the expertise. Take contact with Exchange, and Exchange is sending an expert who was before one of our journalists at a broadcast in Belgium. In the very beginning, this organization in Uganda called Vision Voice, they were working at that moment some 25 people at the very, very beginning of the new private radio. At this moment, and you can have a look at their website, it is a group of television, magazines, newspapers, radio with about 2,000 people. Other example, we are in Burkina Faso. In Burkina Faso, there is a company transporting goods and persons as well that want to improve its activities, that also want to expand its activities. Again, a huge potential, quite well-working company, but lack of money to pay for the expertise, which is very expensive. They contact Exchange, and you see the volunteer expert on the picture who was there to help them with a capacity building program. It was on, sorry, it was on the maintenance and also on the repair of the fleet, and also monitoring the workshop and the warehouse. Mission accomplished, as you can read, and then important to see, when this Mr. Philip Clara, his name, thank you Vera, when this Mr. Philip Clara came back to Belgium, he contacted some Flemish companies, some Belgian companies, who could purchase the spare parts for this fleet. So in the meantime, up to today, there are nice contacts in between this transportation firm in Burkina Faso and some Belgian companies who deliver spare parts for the fleet. Once again, Uganda. There was a firm which was in fact a cattle farm, and they wanted to build their own slaughterhouse. This is quite complicated and difficult. You need expertise. You need expertise, too expensive for them. At that very beginning, this is in the meantime, about 6 years ago, this company was working with 25 people. Today, 256 people are working there. But they needed some information on the standards of how to work for hygiene and also for safety in that slaughterhouse. They contacted Exchange, and Exchange has sent an expert. You see him at the picture. In between brackets, just a detail, just an anecdote. This person is still in Uganda, not as a volunteer anymore. In the meantime, he is working at that company on a high level. Again, nowadays 256 people are working there. They are exporting meat all over Africa. He married in the meantime a Ugandese woman, and he will stay in Uganda. It happens with your volunteers, but it's a nice project. You see that when he contacted, after his first visit there, Flanders or Belgium, as you like, again, there were contacts with Flemish, with Belgian companies to send the equipment for that slaughterhouse. Last example, we are in Senegal. In Senegal, 16 small and medium-sized enterprises, mainly small enterprises, they joined. And they wanted to export their production towards Europe. This needs, of course, lots of regulations and regulations and the very correct packaging. The person on the picture, above to the right, Professor Guido Honje, is one of our professors on packaging at Ghent University. And he was willing, as a volunteer, to share his experience to those people in Senegal, so that at the moment there is exportation, the production has increased, they increased also the sales and the quality. This is my first part. This is exactly what we are doing at Exchange. Why are we doing this? Because we are convinced that promoting entrepreneurship, that promoting more in particular private entrepreneurship, is a strong and sustainable tool against poverty. But I can say it also in a positive way. Promoting private entrepreneurship in developing economies is a powerful, strong and sustainable tool for creating added value. And this is why we are doing what we are doing. And how are we doing it? What is our strategy? We are connecting entrepreneurs from the developing countries who sent us the application form, who sent us their request, with entrepreneurs from the north. In our case, entrepreneurs from Belgium, but not only Belgium, could be Western Europe, could be Europe. And we bring them together, and we make such a partnership to share, as volunteers, this, this information. This is part one. We come to part two, and this is a little bit more slow on how we are working. So I'll start with, as you see, the application form. It is a basis for our company, for our organization, that we are working, as it is called, demand-driven. We receive the demand from the entrepreneurs in the developing countries. And of course you can say, but how do they know you? How can they know that you exist in Belgium as an exchange? How do they know? And this is the first two letters, local representative, LR. This local representative, and I come back on this later on, we have about 50 local representatives in about 15, 17 countries. Most of these people are people living and grown up in that country, but they studied in Belgium. Some of them, I give you an example, in Togo there is Professor Tona, and this is a professor at the Faculty of Agriculture at the University of Lomé, capital of Togo, who knows very, very well Belgium. He studied during 10 years in Belgium. First he was a veterinarian, and then he got his PhD in tropical medicine. But of course he still knows much better his own country and also the SME sector in his country. And he is our volunteer in Togo to send such a project. And when a project arrives, it is very important to have a look at it if it is really sustainable, if it is guaranteeing an inclusive growth, a sustainable inclusive growth. And for that reason, you see other letters coming. There is CC, which is in our organization, country coordinator. There is PC, project coordinator, and there is SC, sector coordinator. These words will come back later. A country coordinator is a volunteer in our organization who knows the country very well. For example, Mr. X knows very well Peru because he was managing there a Belgian company during, let's say, 4 years. And of course he knows exchange very well, he knows Belgium very well, but also Peru or another country. We have about 15 to 17 country coordinators as we are working in 15 to 17 countries. And they can say, take care, don't go now to, for example, Mali. It's too dangerous. Don't send your volunteer experts. Or they can say, it's very safe, you can do this and this. There is a volunteer called country coordinator. I jump over the PC, I come back to it. There is a SC, a sector coordinator. Someone, as a volunteer, working for exchange, but before spent a whole lifetime in one or another sector and knows it very well. And for example, the one will say to us, take care, cultivating tomatoes on a level higher than, for example, 1,500 meters, this is impossible. This project is not sustainable at all. So the sector coordinator will join his or her knowledge with exchange. And at exchange, there are 6 people only working not as a volunteer. These are the project coordinators. They are in the middle. And they start up the whole processes. Imagine that it is a nice application, guarantees sustainability, guarantees inclusive growth. Then we are looking to find in our database with almost 1,000 volunteer experts to find 2, 3, or 4 examples, volunteers who want to share their know-how. And we send the CVs to the applicant. And this is a second baseline in our organization. It is the applicant that finally will make the choice. If there is A, B, C, and D, and the applicant say, okay, I go for C, then at that moment, the applicant agrees to pay for the accommodation and the local transport when our volunteer expert is traveling to that country and stays there but I come back on this, for approximately 2 weeks, 12 days. The next step, of course, this is the match. There is an application, there is the consideration that the project is sustainable, is a good project, and there is a volunteer. And then they start, of course, working on it. There is a direct contact, Skyping, email, in between the applicant, the organization, the enterprise from the developing economy, and our volunteer expert. And there is also, at the same time, at exchange, a briefing, because some of these experts, they are really top experts in their domain, but never they were in, let's say, Ouagadougou, and they should be briefed on that. By the way, when they come back, there is also a debriefing to know and to learn more about this experience. In that sense, Exchange is really a learning organization. And then comes the work trip. After a preparation of 2-3 weeks, direct contact, email, Skype, the expert is traveling to that country. Should not take care of visa, vaccinations, insurance, flight ticket, because this is a job for Exchange. The project coordinator at Exchange will fix it all. The expert volunteer just has to think about his expertise or her expertise to share it with the applicant. Of course, there is also a question of follow-up. After the project has run, there is a question of measuring and evaluation, M&E, to see what were the final results. And so often, sorry, this is too quick. So often there are also follow-up projects. What does it mean? I gave you an example. Suppose there is a small enterprise going well and doing good, and there was already an expert helping them to prepare a business plan. It happens that 2-3 years later, the same applicant comes back to Exchange and said, once again, thanks so much for that business plan. Our production has boomed so that we cannot sell anymore locally our products. Could it maybe be possible to send an expert on exportation? And indeed, we have in our database more experts on exportation, and we can make a new project. This follow-up project, and 30% of our projects or follow-up projects gives us the possibility to have a look at the results of the previous intervention. Exchange is working on 200 projects a year. So 200 times a year in about 17 countries, we are sending experts who are dealing with such a project, who are sharing their know-how with the applicant. Exchange is in the meantime existing for 12 years, and during that period we worked on more than 1,400 projects. In the very beginning, of course, it was not 200 projects a year. It had to start up step by step. I come to the part of the volunteers, because this conference is partly also focused on this. And here they are back again, these names. At Exchange are working 50 local representatives. They are not working at Exchange, they are working in their countries. As I told you, these are the people who really have a look at the enterprise, who send us the application form to see, is this an enterprise that already exists for 2 years and work registered, where at least are working 10 staff, where at least there is a turnover of 25,000 euro and not more than 500,000 euro, because at that moment maybe they can pay themselves for the expertise required. We have the country and the sector coordinators, about 25. The people, once again, who have a look at the application form. This is the start, and very important. You have to know if the application form guarantees a sustainable project. Once again, It is needed to see in advance if it is sustainable, and then still there can be surprises, of course, but you have to make your work at the very beginning. There are the experts, the volunteers. These are all people, and I can tell you, really top professionals. The average age was last year 56 years. So it are not all pensioners, not at all. By the way, in 2012, the average age was 51. We cannot predict it in advance. It depends on which kind of applications we receive. But these experts, average age 56 years, have at least all of them, each of them, 10 to 15 years experience in their domain on entrepreneurship. Most of the competences required are on management, different forms. Can be financial, logistic, ICT, human resources, overall business plan, exportation management, but 44% are questions on management. Our experts are also very open-minded. They are willing to share their expertise for free as a volunteer. Such a project doesn't cost them any €1, but of course they do not win any €1 neither. They shouldn't pay for their vaccinations and the flight ticket. They shouldn't pay for the insurances. All is done by exchange. But on the other hand, they cannot ask money for their intervention and their sharing of know-how. Nevertheless, when they come back, they are really very satisfied because of the intercultural training they have obtained when they were working there. But I will come back on this. They are also working in the language of the applicant. If it is in Latin America, Spanish. If it is in Africa, and all depends on which country, French or English. And as I told you, there are about 200 of them in the field. You can say each working day a year there is someone, expert from exchange, a volunteer, going or coming to a project. If you count together all the working days of all our volunteers, as well the local representatives, as well the sector coordinators and the country coordinators, as well the experts, and you count together also the 6 persons as a project coordinator who are working at exchange, then this organization counts for 40 full-time equivalents. So if you want to do the same job from scratch as exchange is doing nowadays, you need 40 full-time equivalents. Fortunately, we do not have to pay them. They are volunteers, otherwise we couldn't do, because the money is not there. But if you count all these days together, from all those people, they are of course not working daily. Some of them, as the experts, are working in preparation only 2 or 3 weeks a year, and or in the country where the applicant is from during 2 weeks. If you count all these days, again, 40 full-time equivalents. I come to the last part of the presentation and the one before last slide. Why, in fact, are these people willing to volunteer? These well-paid experts, most of them not yet in pension, why do they do it? Well, first of all, the social contact. It's very important. They learn to know more people, also in Belgium at exchange, who can share their stories of the many projects that they were working on. It is fun. It is nice to have such another thing during your work time. These people are not yet in pension, most of them, but nevertheless, they worked a long career, and this is something different within their career. They like it very much. But also that feeling of being useful, of giving back, of making a difference is important, really important. And you see it when they are coming back after a project. They are so motivated. They are so uploaded. I come back on this on the next slide. Of course, they learn new experiences, and they learn to do much more with less tools, less means. For each problem in our countries in Europe, we open the door and we have 10 solutions. That's not always the case in Africa. With few tools, they have to make a huge job. And it's a nice experience for our experts as well. They are, of course, appreciated for that by others. Important for the identity and the esteem, and most of all for the self-esteem, of course. And it is taking responsibility, so they feel themselves responsible, which also gives them a nice feeling. Last slide. Why are the organizations willing to leave their workers, their employees, their top professionals to go there for 2 weeks? Well, did I go too quick? No, sorry. Yep, okay. They get back, as I told you already, a supercharged employee. The one who comes back after such a project in Africa and say to his team all around the table, we will launch a new project, we will go for it, motivated, new energy. Excellent for such a senior manager so often. There is a whole network. This world is very quickly globalizing. It's very important to know that there are other countries than only European countries. It is an open network with new potential business partners. And I gave you some indications on that during my examples, you remember. They are acknowledged as being professionals because they are working in situations which are not always very easy, and nevertheless they do. It is also relevant, it is a concretization of the corporate social responsibility. And more, this is important for a company in Europe to have and to indicate what you really are doing for CSR. Not only what you're talking about, corporate social responsibility, but also what you are doing. And it gives your company visibility, and it is also a networking in the own country, because there is an evolution in which very soon employees will choose their company instead of the opposite. Long time it were the employers who choose their workers and their employees. But there will come a time that an employee is willing to work for this or that enterprise because of the corporate social responsibility of that enterprise, because to be proud, to be part of such an enterprise. And this is also, of course, an added value for the organization, for the enterprise who is sending a volunteer expert. So I summarize. First of all, there were the examples. Different countries, different competences, different people, but all of them volunteers doing nice job. 2, there was the working method, step by step, but in that sense, 200 plus projects a year. In the meantime, more than 1,400 projects. And 3, why? Well, because it's nice for the volunteers and it's nice for their organizations. And I thank you for your attention, and please bring me your questions.
Thank you very much, Roland. I think we got a lot of useful information about expert volunteers. Máte nějaké otázky? Máme pár minutek ještě čas do dalšího vystoupení. Prosím, Ivan Voleš.
Ivan Voleš, Hospodářská komora. I have a question. You mentioned that you make measurement and evaluation of the projects. Can you tell us some results, if you have also negative experience, positive, and what lessons you make from this process?
Yeah. Evaluation and measuring is very, very, very important. And of course, this is on entrepreneurship, And this means, of course, unfortunately, sometimes there are mistakes. And I will give you an example of this. But first of all, we are measuring on more domains, about 7 domains. What is the evolution of the turnover of the enterprise where our volunteer expert was working? What is the evolution of the employment in that enterprise where he or she was working? What is the evolution of the working conditions of those workers in these enterprises in the developing economies? What is the evolution of the diversification of goods and products in these enterprises? And so on and so on. We not only measure it at the end of the project, because then everything is okay. Everything and everyone is satisfied. But we also measure it some 6 months later. We also measure it again 18 months later. And of course, there are also controls, and one of the very best controls is the so-called follow-up projects. I remember you, 30% of our projects are follow-up projects. 2-3 years later, the applicant comes back to us and asks for another expertise. And this gives us an insight. There we can see what really was the effect of the first intervention. Fortunately, the results are good, not to say very good. And I say fortunately because half of our financial means as an exchange are paid by our government. And they also want each 3 years an in-depth evaluation. And each 3 years, they ask an independent auditor to have a look at what we have done and to have a look also in the enterprise in some countries where we have worked. And at random is chosen, for example, last year to go to South Africa and also to Uganda, and 3 years before it was to Mozambique and also to South Africa, to have a look, is this money well spent? And this also gives us results. But there can be failures, unfortunately. I give you one example. I will anonymize the example, not to say the names. Let's say, for example, in Malawi, but it was not in Malawi, there was an enterprise on vegetable oils who asked for expertise. In our group of volunteer experts, we have a top specialist on that. A person who is following the last trends in vegetable oil production, who is studying a lot on that, who can bring it over, who can also bring it over in the language required, suppose it was Malawi, so in English, who carefully studied the application form, who contacted the applicant to know exactly what it was all about, and then, after that preparation, went to, let's say, Malawi. Coming there, in that enterprise, he gathered the management around the table. There were 9 persons. And during the first 2 days, they carefully studied once again the precise question. What is the demand, what is the request of this applicant? And then he was sure he get it. He got it. He came back to his modest hotel. He brought lots of information. He could work on the internet, not always very easy, but nevertheless, during the next coming 8 days, he was carefully working on the question of that applicant. And then, the last 2-3 days of his being there, he gathered again around the table the management of that enterprise, the 9 persons, and explained his solution. I can tell you, it would be hard to find a better expert in Belgium and around for finding a solution for that problem. He gave that solution. They were very satisfied, like in Africa they are always very satisfied, and they said, say hello to your family in Belgium, thanks a lot, and so on and so on. And when we made our first measuring and evaluation after 6 months, we saw that only half of the project was implemented. I was very sad about this. One can be very glad to say at least half is implemented. No, I was very sad because the other half was not implemented. And we had a look, and our country coordinators, once a year, they go to their country to have contacts with the local representatives. And they went also to the enterprise. What exactly went wrong? What was wrong? What was wrong was that our expert was in his hotel room during 8 or 9 days, not speaking with the management of that enterprise. He didn't have the right intercultural competences to work on it with the people who send us the application form. He should have been around the table the full 12 days. He should have listened to the proposals they make, and that sometimes at the first view, or a little bit crazy, but not always at the second view. Sometimes our experts coming back tell me, in fact, we learned the most. They are meaning to say we learned on human relations, on new networks, we have new friends, and they brought themselves technologies, what was required, of course, very normal. But the big mistake of our expert that time in that project was not to be together to speak daily. This is also a spoken culture in most of these countries, to be together and to, during, for example, the first week, try to find together a solution. And the second week, try to create such a basis for implementing it. The project at the very end, the result, the working document, should be a product of all of them, not only our expert, but the 9 managers of that enterprise together with our expert. And this is an example of a mistake. Please, if you have other questions.
Jestli můžeme nechat ty dotazy nakonec, aby jsme trošku dodržovali ten program. Určitě bude pak ještě čas. I'm sorry, we have to follow the time schedule, so we leave the questions in the end of the session.
Okay, thank you.